Hello. I'd like to start off by extending a really warm welcome to everyone who's joined us. This is the first of a brand new webinar series, and the title of today's webinar is How Can We Ensure that Counter-Fraud Investigators are competent and able to conduct investigations with integrity and credibility? So there's obviously a huge amount to unpack there, but luckily we have Nick Atkinson, Intelligentsia's Commercial Director, and Ralph Coburn, who is a Senior Counter-Fraud Trainer. We're particularly lucky to have Ralph with us today because he's actually dialed in from California. A little bit more about that in a moment. And they are here to help us begin to answer this huge question. Tiny bit of housekeeping for everybody, just to let you know, we are recording this session. You might have noticed that your webcam has been disabled. A copy of the full discussion will be made available afterwards, and we'll also be sending out some further information which will add a little bit more sort of granular detail to some of the issues that we'll be looking at. But we are quite limited on time. We've only got 30 minutes. So if you do have any questions, we'd be really grateful if you could pop them into the questions section, and we will get back to you to answer those questions after today's session. Now, it is always important to talk about fraud, as I'm sure that the guys will back me up. But this week is Fraud Awareness Week, so it's a particularly timely discussion. Nick, I'd like to start with you. Webinars and blogs, this is kind of new territory for Intelligentsia, and I understand you've also launched an employer-focused campaign called How Can We? Can you just sort of unpack a little bit of that for us before we start?
Yeah, thanks for that, Ben. So Intelligentsia Training, we're a specialist apprenticeship training provider, as many know, working within a number of niche areas: counter-fraud, intelligence analysis, data, risk, security sectors, it goes on. And we've been working with numerous government agencies, public sector departments, local authorities, the law enforcement community, as well as banks and insurance providers. And we've developed this How Can We campaign as, to solve sector-specific problems through people development. We all recognize that there's a number of, training gaps out there that we're confident we've got some excellent solutions for. We're an Ofsted good graded training provider, so we're obviously doing something right. And we really, really are passionate about what we do, and we have some fantastic solutions to tackle these skills and training gaps. And the How Can We campaign, a range of webinars, we think is a great solution to that.
Thanks so much, Nick. Ralph, before I ask the first question, what time is it where you are?
It's well, my computer actually says it's 3 minutes past 11, which is still on UK time, but it's actually 3 minutes past 2 in the morning here, Ben. So,
oh my goodness.
I'm not sure if I've overdosed in caffeine, but I'm awake. We're here.
Well, we're very, very grateful to have you. You must have been one of the first people through the door after they loosened up the travel restrictions.
Yeah, I've got 3 kids and 5 grandkids in the States. I've not seen them for 2.5 years. So, yeah, we were just waiting for it to open up. It opened up on the 8th of November. So the first flight we could get was the 11th of November. So I had to do some negotiating with Nick and the rest of the management team to actually get here and make the promise that I would do the delivery from Southern California. I'm in a log cabin in the mountains in Southern California. What could go wrong?
It just looks like one of those Microsoft Teams type backgrounds, to be honest, Ralph. You're really at home.
Well, we're very grateful to have you with us. Tell me, how long have you been in fraud investigation, and what training and experience do you have? What's your background? What's led you to this?
Yeah, so my background from the early days is law enforcement. So I joined the police at 19 years of age. So I served in Strathclyde Police in Glasgow in the CID and in uniform, drugs units and fraud squads, checking credit cards when in the days that we used to have things called checks. I then moved on from that into the private sector. And the second half of my career has been in the private sector. More laterally, sort of working with AXA Insurance, running their field investigation team. I did that for about 13 years before moving to Intelligentsia. Got my master's in counter fraud and counter corruption, and I'm a bit of a fraud geek as well. I've always got my nose into to books about fraud or trolling the internet. So that's the background.
Thanks so much, Ralph. And we all, I mean, we all sort of, it's a given that, you know, police officers, law enforcement are going to be trained to be carrying out investigations. I'm a documentary filmmaker. You know, I like to sniff out a story. I do a bit of snooping around. What would I need if I wanted to, you know, get into the fraud investigation business?
Yeah, so at this current stage within the UK, absolutely nothing. I mean, I'm sitting in California at the moment, and in this state, there's a lot of qualifications you need competency, etc. But within the UK, we have no licensing, no minimum competency levels. Back in 2001, the British government and the Security Industry Authority tried to regulate the security industry, including investigators, but that's not been done to date. There's a couple of things that have got in the way. There's been the pandemic, obviously, and Brexit. So we're still trying to get that licensing, and there is a model in place for that. It started off looking at the licensing of individuals. It then kind of developed into the licensing of investigative activities. So we have that model there, and in 2015, the Irish government adopted it. So the Republic of Ireland have got licensing at the moment, and the British government, I think, are watching that quite closely with a view to possibly implementing it at some point in the future. So short answer is that, yeah, you could walk out tomorrow, Ben, and you could call yourself an investigator and go and delve into people's personal lives.
That does surprise me. What potential risks would you envisage, you know, unleashing somebody like me with no experience on the investigation sector?
Yeah, so you know, by their very nature, investigators, as I say, delve into people's personal life. So there are huge risks there for privacy, for the Human Rights Act, for individuals who are ignorant of the law. There are few examples and recent examples of investigations that have been conducted by people who are just not competent, and I'll probably go into those at a later stage. But investigation, as I say, by its very nature, involves delving into the private lives of individuals. And an investigator that sets up on his own doesn't need to have any qualifications. You know, most of them have a sort of general knowledge of data protection and GDPR, but they need to have far more depth than that, and because the consequences of them not, you know, are quite dire.
Just very briefly, Ralph, when you say consequences, what type of things are you talking about there?
Well, there's for organisations and business, there's a huge reputational risk there. I'll talk in a little while about the post office. They've been involved in something quite recently, and the name of the post office has been dragged through the mud. And then for individuals, you know, individuals can be obviously fined, imprisoned. There are regulatory fines, and regularity is not very easy to say at 9 minutes past 2 in the morning.
Thanks, Ralph. Nick, just to bring you back in, you're, you know, obviously heavily involved in the development of training solutions, you know, and support with the issues that Ralph we're talking about here. Tell me a little bit about the fraud investigator apprenticeship and how that is looking to create a sort of benchmark standard for investigators.
Yeah, so the Level 4 Counter Fraud Investigator Apprenticeship Standard, it was developed by a public sector-led trailblazer group, which was actually led by HMRC. It was developed for them to tackle their own in-house training gap, but it was developed as a methodology to deliver a minimum level of standardized training for all public sector investigatory personnel. and it delivers a wide range of knowledge, skills, and behaviours that the sector recognised as being essential, vital, really, to operate in these specialist roles. But it's great now to see the number of private sector organisations have recognised the importance of ensuring that their staff are trained to the same standard. You know, the clue's in the word standard, Ben. After all, there should be no us and them. But with counter fraud, which Ralph will talk about, you know, half the time people are chasing the same person. Somebody that may be defrauding DWP could be defrauding an insurance company or a bank. And that the level 4 counter fraud investigator apprenticeship covers everything. It's almost a turnkey exercise. You know, covers everything from understanding legislation to commencing an investigation to seeing it through to a potential courtroom scenario, teaching specialist skills like interviewing and searches, and it provides that full toolkit for staff, new or existing, you know, to be effective in these really, really specialist roles.
Great. So it sounds like there's a huge amount of expertise that you've been able to draw upon, you know, developing this apprenticeship. Is this something that Intelligentsia has developed, you know, in response to a need across the sector?
Oh, absolutely. The sector have been, you know, crying out for years for a methodology to, you know, formalise and regulate the way that their, you know, their counter fraud investigatory staff are trained. And the fact that it can be accessed via the apprenticeship levy, again, is a massive benefit. You know, for those that still aren't aware of the apprenticeship levy, it was introduced back in 2017 to help the government reach its target of 3 million apprentices by 2020. Still didn't get there, but that's another point. You know, so numerous organisations we're working with are using the apprenticeship as a route to upskill staff or recruit new staff. You know, there's an opportunity for organisations to use both methods.
And if just to reiterate, folks, if there are any questions for, you know, for example, on things like the apprenticeship levy, do put them in the questions section, and we will get back to you after the session if you want to talk to us about those things. Thanks, Nick. Just Ralph, I'd like to bring you back in. We began to talk about this. What are the consequences of me being out there with no qualifications? You know, say I set up an organization, what are the consequences of me as an individual and also as an organization for not having a standard of practice?
Yeah, so if I can first sort of set the scene, we've got, you know, within the UK at the moment, we've got a huge problem with fraud. You know, you've got your volume fraud, the stuff that affects, you know, your mum, your dad, your sister, your brother, the stuff that's going on day in and day out. And we've got the serious and organised frauds that organisations such as the NCA and the Serious Fraud Office, they deal with. So what we're looking at and what we're talking about here are the investigators, the competency of the investigators who are doing this, you know, investigating the volume fraud. And these are the people that we need to upskill and get them on a level playing field with investigators from law enforcement as well. So some of the potential consequences, I spoke earlier about miscarriages of justice, and I mentioned the post office. So the Horizon scandal is something, excuse me, that some of the viewers and listeners may have come across or read about recently. So over the past 14 years, there have been 736 postmasters and postmistresses who have been prosecuted and persecuted by investigation teams within the post office. These, you know, there are quite a few of these cases have now been overturned. They've been through judicial review. And the post office have currently set up a compensation fund, and they're putting aside, I think the figure quoted was about £100,000 per individual to pay compensation to these people who have been wrongly convicted, whose lives have been you know, overturned. They've lost their business, they've lost their family, there's been divorces, etc. So it's a really sort of dire dire consequences. That's just one example. Another one which I picked up only a couple of weeks ago was about a dogs charity. So this dogs charity over the last couple of years have prosecuted between 80 and 100 individuals, private prosecutions, with the assistance of a solicitor's company. And what happened there was they brought out private prosecutions against individuals who either pled guilty straight away, decided that they were going to face the music, but where they decided to go to trial, the charity and the solicitors dropped the case, didn't take it to trial. But fortunately, very recently, one individual managed to take it to trial, go all the way to trial, and at the trial, the judge, the exact quote that he made halfway through the trial was that the animal charity and the solicitor had committed systematic fraud and had been perverting the course of justice by attempting to prosecute these 80 to 100 people. So that, as I say, it just happened within the last couple of weeks. So more news to come on that. And then finally, it's not just investigators in the public and private sector. I mean, disclosure, there's a huge issue with disclosure at the moment, and there have been a few things in the news. And I think the CPS and the government and various other bodies are trying to do something about it. They're trying to address it in the moment. In fact, the 11th to the 15th of October this year was National Disclosure Week, but quite embarrassingly, there was another case lost because of a failure of disclosure. Lewis Bloor from Towie and 5 other individuals had gone to trial for selling low-value diamonds. Had gone to trial. Halfway through the trial in National Disclosure Week, the trial was dropped because of failure by the Metropolitan Police and the CPS to disclose the fact that the people they had got to value the diamonds also had a commercial relationship with the Metropolitan Police. So the consequences across the board are quite dire.
So it's not only, you know, rooting out incompetency. This is also, it's a potential for good work to be undermined by incompetency as well. That's really important to understand. And does this legislation apply to all investigators? You know, say I've sent a runner out to do some investigation on somebody. Is it across the board, no matter how small that work is?
Yes, the question that I'd probably bounce that back to you with a question, and the question for me, Ben, is: does it matter to the individual that's being investigated, if it's an insurance investigator, a blue badge investigator, or indeed a police officer that's breaching their human rights, being intrusive, affecting the right to a fair trial, the right to privacy, etc., etc. You know, that individual is being investigated and is owed a duty of responsibility by the person who's investigating them. I mean, the Human Rights Act applies to public bodies, but within the Human Rights Act, it goes on to explain that all courts in the UK must apply the law in a way which is compatible with the human rights. And it goes on to say that they must do it in all cases they hear, even if they don't involve a public authority. So it's all about acting within the spirit of the law, if not the letter of the law. So yeah, it applies to all investigators.
And you used the word responsibility there, Ralph. My fledgling investigative business, what responsibility do I have as a business, as an organisation?
Yeah, so I think at the beginning we mentioned the Security Industry Authority and the British government looking at licensing the various activities of investigators, but we've been waiting for 20 years for that. We could be waiting for another 20 years, who knows. So I think it's incumbent now on organisations and business to grasp the nettle, take some responsibility, to train investigators, make sure that they're conducting ethical, proportionate and transparent investigations, either, as we say, in line with current legislation or within the spirit of the law. We also need to recognise the size and the scale of the issue that we've got at the moment, and identify not skills gaps in their investigators, but identify there is absolutely skills gaps across across every organisation and every business. And these skills gaps can be filled in a few ways. There are a few qualifications out there. I mentioned earlier I did my masters in counter fraud and counter corruption, but there's also things like ACFS. There's a British standard for investigation businesses, so BS 10200, and when I worked for AXA, we exposed ourselves to an audit, and we went through the process to be accredited to BS 10200, and we got that in 2015, I think it was, and continuously held that, and the team still hold that. But that involved getting all of the investigators within the team qualified to a minimum of IQ level 3 in professional investigation. The level 4 fraud investigator apprenticeship that we do at the moment is it's a step up from that. So that's the kind of thing. That's the minimum I think that people should be aiming for. But as I say, there's a number of routes that can be taken, and I think there should be parity and skills across the board, because half the time we're all chasing the same people. Fraud's been described as chameleon-like, or the fraud bubble. You squeeze it in one place, it pops out somewhere else. Insurance investigators will be investigating the same people as DWP investigators, etc. And I think Nick used the phrase earlier on that we're all in this together, and yeah, we absolutely are.
Thanks so much, Ralph. Lots of important things to think about there. Nick, I want to bring you back in. Just want to talk a little bit more about the apprenticeship. How does that support employers, large or small, my tiny investigation business, but also public sector organisations and large organisations such as AXA? How does this apprenticeship help them to meet their obligations? And what do I, as an employer, get out of this?
Yeah, good question. So the Counter Fraud Apprenticeship is a level 4 program, and it provides employers with access to specialist skills, Ben, and knowledge and behaviours that it delivers, ensuring investigators are fully aware and proficient in all areas in which they work, understanding the legislation, what they can and can't do to remain compliant but effective. And employees engaging with us and our delivery model receive a full turnkey operation where we assess the current level of knowledge and experience and develop a program that's the best fit for their teams. This isn't a one-size-fits-all. Our delivery model also includes a number of additional modules that are really relevant: cybersecurity awareness, open source intelligence techniques. These are providing investigatory personnel with some really great additional skills. The final piece of the jigsaw is mental health awareness that we deliver as part of the program. Could not be more relevant, Ben, than in today's society, with COVID and all of the other issues that go along with that. So, to answer your question, they get an awful lot from doing this program, far in excess of probably what they've done in the past.
Thanks, Nick. Ralph, just briefly, I want to bring you back in on this. I appreciate this is a very new scheme. Could you just give us an idea of what type of feedback you're beginning to get already from it?
Yeah, the feedback's fabulous. I mean, one of the when I was an investigator, you got the buzz. You went out and you got some evidence to secure a case. You get that buzz. The buzz that I get now is from seeing some of these. I was going to use the term fresh-faced apprentices, but apprentices now are range from, I think, Nick, 30 odd years of age is the average age of an investigator. But it's great to see them coming in, and at the very beginning, we ask them to detail their experience levels and tell us what they know, and it's amazing. It really is. It's mind-blowing to see that people who have been investigators for 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 10 years, the limited knowledge that they have and the consequences of operating as an investigator with that limited knowledge. But very, very quickly, we start to get into to the first couple of modules, and we start to impart our knowledge on the individuals, and you can see the light bulb, the light bulbs coming on, and the feedback has just been absolutely, fabulous.
That's great to hear. That's great to hear. Now, there's a little bit of a sort of stigma around the word apprentice. When I think of it, it's often, young people straight out of school. But it sounds like, me as a jaded filmmaker in my 40s, I could still be applicable for this system.
Yeah, I mean, I'll pick that one up, Ben, if I may. So, as Ralph mentioned there, the average age of people doing our program is in the mid-30s, who've been doing the job for years but had little or no training. And, gone are the days where apprenticeships are aimed at, the stigma's still there, isn't it, that apprenticeships are for spotty-faced teenagers leaving school wanting to be an office junior or a trainee butcher. But fortunately, the changes in the apprenticeship levy system back in 2017, as I mentioned, that's given us access to numerous staff at different ages and different stages in their career. So it's not just, this isn't just for school leavers, far from it.
And okay, so I'm going to undertake this apprenticeship, or what would be the difference, say, of me doing that, or say doing sort of like a quick commercial course or some online training? What do I get going through this scheme?
Yeah, again, simple answers. Lots of the benefits of an apprenticeship over a shorter, quick fix commercial or an online course, they're massive, Ben. The apprenticeship program was developed by the sector for the sector as the Uber program for the people working in these specialist roles. Shorter courses and qualifications often just tackle one issue or deliver one skill. But the counter-fraud investigator stand was built as that end-to-end solution, providing the entire toolkit, the wide range of knowledge, skills, behaviors that the Trailblazer Group deemed to be essential for people to operate compliantly and effectively in these specialist roles. But as it's an apprenticeship, it delivers a full holistic approach to the way counter-fraud investigators operate, with assistance from other specialist skills that they may have been lacking. So we're helping people with their English and maths. They may have previously undiagnosed dyslexia or dyspraxia. We have people in training that are benefiting from this additional support that they wouldn't have had that doing a quick online fix. The main benefit really, though, of the apprenticeship is that it delivers parity in skills. I keep using this word standard. There is no us and them. There shouldn't be us and them. So the fact that we're delivering this program to banks, insurance companies, local authorities, public sector departments, everybody using the same set of skills, all doing the same apprenticeship, that's the difference between people doing, I've done this course and somebody's done that course, and I did mine online and I did mine via some other distance learning technique. Everybody using the same program is the main benefit of that.
That's fantastic. That's fantastic. And Ralph, you're responsible for delivering, some of this training. What is it in this apprenticeship, in your experience so far? Again, I know this is all very sort of new. What is it in the apprenticeship that you think is missing from the sector at the moment?
I think the word Nick mentioned was parity. Parity across the board. And if you look at the profession of an investigator, it's an honourable profession. We want to keep it. Honourable. You wouldn't employ an unqualified electrician to come out and rewire your house. You wouldn't have an unqualified teacher going to teach your kids, or you could think of a thousand examples. But what we do have is people taking someone off the shelf and sitting them at a desk and telling them they're an investigator, and off you trot. That's where the apprenticeship and the formal training, that's where they come into to play, because what we need to do is have parity across the board, ensure that all investigators are qualified to that minimum level 4 apprenticeship. I mean, that should be the absolute minimum. They need to be aware of the legislation around investigations. I can't tell you the amount of investigators that have said to me, I don't need to worry about the Human Rights Act because that applies to public bodies. That's just, you know, that's incredible to me. You know, ethical behaviour is something that we need to promote. And the increase in confidence and capability, as I said earlier, you know, when we're delivering this stuff, you know, I've been doing it now since June, I think I started, but you can just see the increase in the, you know, as people increase in their capability, that you see their confidence growing as well. I mean, some of these people have not been in education for 10, 15 years, and it's fantastic. You know, when you start getting papers back from them and you help them to develop, and as I say, you see that confidence rising, and they're doing these, you know, they're doing investigative skills within their role, and we're just adding that bit of knowledge there. That, and you see, you know, I mentioned it earlier, that light bulb moment when it sinks in. Ah, right, that's why I'm doing that. That's why I need to follow this legislation. You know, some people that we speak to have been in the fraud investigation business for years, and you know, they don't know what points they need to prove. What evidence they need to gather, how to make that evidence admissible in court, and you know, if we put all of these things together and you produce a competent investigator who is submitting evidence of a high quality, whether that be to a court, to be a tribunal, to whatever, you know, that's got to result in savings to the you know, the public purse and to private organisations as well.
Thanks. That's fantastic. Folks, I'm conscious of time. We've run over a little bit, so I think we may need to draw to a close. What is really coming across is the passion with which you're talking about this, and I just want to sort of reiterate, you know, I would love to carry on talking. I want to talk about you know, how people that you're working with at the moment, Ralph, you know, how they're saying it's affecting their bottom line. I'd love to talk about, you know, whether you think investigators should be licensed. I'd love to talk about what barriers there might be to kind of implementing these kind of changes across the sector. We'd love to hear from you. Please put any questions that you still have in the questions section. Also, I just want to say, you know, this is the first webinar of a series. There will be some more information coming out about the upcoming webinars, so do join us for those. Thank you so much for helping us to inaugurate this series. Thanks for joining us. But I think we'll wind it up there, and we'll let Ralph probably get some much needed shut eye.
Thank you, Ben.
Thanks so much, everyone, and thank you to Nick and Ralph.
Yeah, thanks everybody for joining. Take care.
Bye-bye.